What up, family? This is the Knockin on 30 podcast. I'm Tony.
I'm Brianna.
I'm Dylan.
And I'm Dennis.
And we are also the Millennial Community. So we're an organization about change, but we're not going to get into all that right now. First of all, what's up, everybody? We finally here.
Yes.
Finally.
Long time coming.
It has been, definitely.
People been wondering, what happened to the Millennial Community? Y'all just disappeared on us.
Yeah,
Y'all not
yeah.
volunteering no more. It's Black
Right.
History Month. What's good?
What happened in January? I thought we do MLK.
Yeah,
they
that's
they
true.
definitely been
True.
looking, yes.
But the podcast is called Knockin on 30. And so what exactly are we going to be talking about?
Man, knocking on 30. So definitely was somewhat of a work in progress. I'll honestly say was kind of a brainchild of all the four of us when it came down to how do we take our platform from what it currently was, which we know in the community, getting our hands dirty, etc. What do we do now? So what we found was that we were millennials leading millennials. And so what that meant was it was a little difficult for us to really get done what we wanted to get done from a nonprofit standpoint. So we said, well, hey, we've been out here in the third largest city in Houston. And knowing that, we've put together a lot of different events, and we just have this millennial stereotype. So knocking on 30 is everything you can think of that is millennial. So we'll be talking about different stereotypes, different things that affect us when it comes to the workplace, to the world. We got a lot of haters out there. We got a lot of people that love us too.
Well, thank you for that.
No doubt.
Wait. So we can rewind it back a little bit further for the people who don't know, what is the Millennial Community?
Yeah. So, as Dennis said, we started off as a nonprofit organization, which we still are. So if y'all want to donate, you can donate to us at www.themillennialcommunity.com. We still taking those, by the way.
Always.
And we still we have membership as well. We kind of reworked how that goes and all that, but we are the Millennial Community. We basically are the people who put all the work in, and so now here we are with the podcast, and we got what, some history that we wanted to get into. But,
Definitely, yes.
So go ahead and hit it with the Chipotle story.
How did we get started? How did y'all get started?
I absolutely love the Chipotle story. I love it for different reasons. I mean, granted, one, I was fresh home from college. So 2014, coming back to the city here in Houston, and just, any other college kid trying to start a job, different interviews lined up, etc. And got a call from Tony. It was like, hey, what you got going on? It's kind of been a while since we chopped it up from college. Little short story, we also went to high school and college together, so we're going on like 15 years of friendship. So we've been rocking for a while, and definitely was a necessity for us to kind of put our brains together and figure out how do we make change within our community. So we sat down over lunch at Chipotle right down the east side part of Houston, and just started talking about the things that matter most to us, what is important when it comes down to how do we be activists in the community and really just lead our generation. And this was definitely a thought directly from Tony. However, he and I had some similar chemistry, and he's like, man, if I'm gonna do this with anybody, he was kind of the first person I thought of. And so from there, we sat down, started putting a structure together, and a lot of it that went into place was, doing everything from the legal side to paperwork to what is actually going to be our purpose once we hit the ground running. And just to kind of wrap it all up in a pretty bow, there was definitely a necessity for our generation to have a voice, our generation to have a representation out there in the community to show that even though we have a lot of different stigmas and stereotypes amongst us as a generation labeled as millennials, we can still also change what happens to the next generation. And I think it was the whole bridging the gap aspect that we really wanted to approach. So I'll let Tony kind of chime in on his side of the history. But for myself, it was definitely our friendship that really led to a lot of what we have done, and just the overall need and the thought that we saw out there in the community.
Well, Dennis pretty much nailed it. I think you pretty much wrapped it all up in a good way. For me, I had just graduated college a few years before. We had sat down, and being from Houston, coming back to come back to my city, not going to school in Houston, it was kind of like, okay, like what's going on out here? And as you started to like figure it out, you'd be like, man, Houston is a very cliquish type city, and so
Very.
Yes,
and so
we know
like,
Dylan agrees.
we tried to create something where it wasn't about being in a clique. It was more about your heart and wanting to give back, and kind of just started from there. So like, I really want to ask y'all to chime in on why y'all even joined, because we went through a lot of, like, I won't say ups and downs, but a lot of changes and a lot of like, how do we get better and better and better, and then now that led us to here. So like, what made you guys stick with us, and I guess what first made you join?
Well, for me, it was I volunteered so much in college, and I was just looking for an organization that I could join that wasn't cliquey, that I could really just plant some roots in. And so I was on volunteerhouston.com, and I saw Young Millennials of Texas at the time, before a few changes were made, and you guys were having a think tank. So I went just to kind of see what was going on, and I really loved it. I loved the conversation. I loved that it was a lot of young professionals, and then you guys were doing a lot of volunteer projects around Houston. So it was like, okay, well, I think I can like handle this. Everybody seems, on the right page. So from there, the opportunity came to join like the leadership circle, and so it was like really easy to kind of jump on board with that. And then that's when Tony was like, oh, do you want to do some health? What was
No,
it?
I was about to say let's talk about that, 'cause that was hilarious, because like what we had been deciding was that we wanted people to kind of hone in on whatever skills they had already been working towards or just been on, and I knew that you worked in the health industry of some sort, so had this bright idea. I'm like, Delyn, how about you give us some health tips, and we'll put that in the newsletter? And she was like,
How about
nah.
Nah.
She was like, that's not my passion, in a very millennial type of way.
Yeah, it just wasn't anything that I was super interested in doing. I did it all day long, and it was just like, no, that's not really for me. But then you proposed doing the blog, and it was like, yeah, like I would love to do that. It was just like the best opportunity. It really fit with what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so, running around the city doing interviews and meeting all these people. And, the first time it really made sense was when I did the interview with you guys, which is on our website.
Yeah. And the pictures are dope.
Yeah,
And
but
she has a real camera now.
a real camera.
Talk about inspiration, right?
Right. From there, like, just look at, what that was able to birth. So.
Right.
Wait, I want to ask, like, so talk about the blog a little more, because you are, over the blog. So, like, what will this blog be like this year? Like, what should they expect,
Everyone should expect, a lot more of articles about millennials, not just, where you can go for brunch, which of course we have to include that. Where you can go for happy hour, you have to include
Houston
that.
staple.
Yeah, that is definitely.
But just about some really cool things that are going on with millennials in the city. Of course, we'll have, guests come on here, but, just to expand on everything that they have going on in their lives, and just everything that's going on with us, from political views and, just everything.
Yeah,
So.
no doubt.
All right, so I guess that brings it to me. I joined because I wasn't even out of college yet. It was my senior year, and I was really looking to get into some opportunities to volunteer around Houston, and also meet people who have a like mind, and just really get out there. And I kind of went to a few events, and it was kind of like get your hand dirty, and then it was kind of like, all right, well, since you've been here, we noticed you. Let me just throw you in there. So I was kind of like, as soon like the first few events I went to, then I was like in the leadership circle, and then I was on the board, and it was just like a snowball effect. So it was nice to be the young one, but also they gave me opportunity to show my growth and really own some projects. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I mean, you like kick butt. And you still do.
Yeah.
I want to touch on something real quick. Yeah, y'all talked about Houston being cliquey, and I brought it up.
Right.
But like, what does that even mean, though? Like, what are we saying?
If like Houston has its own social circle, so if you don't know someone, it's really hard to get in there, because a lot of people here grew up with the same people that they hang out with. I feel like that's really Houston.
And coming from Dallas,
Oh, here we go.
Unfortunately.
Here we
it's
go.
very much so like people from Houston, they were born here, raised here, grew up here, and they don't leave. And so like that same circle of friends, or they'll leave and come right back. And so
It's 'cause
just
the city's
being
so great.
Right. That's why you here, right?
Look,
Uh-oh.
look, don't. But
Don't make me go Oak Cliff on y'all.
ooh,
That's what she wanted to say.
but we're professionals, so I won't do that. But no,
Are we?
it's just very much so. Everybody has a really tight circle,
Right.
and so unless you go out of your way to kind of get in with somebody, I think that's the
Even then, it's really
Somewhere.
hard because then you can like put yourself out there, and they're like, "We don't know you. You good."
I think part of the tight circle, cliquey city is because Houston's so big
Right.
that like you can be from a part of Houston and never go to another part of Houston,
True.
and then so that's all you kind of know is that
Yes.
part that you grew up in, and it's
And
just,
even when you do get older, you start venturing out to different parts of Houston.
Yeah.
You venturing out with
Yeah.
those same people,
Y-
so it don't
yes.
matter.
Exactly.
It don't
Yes.
matter.
And I will say too, just being from the city, growing up here, the stereotype exists for the simple fact of saying that you can almost tell what side of town a person is from simply based on like talking to them, interacting with them. And I won't say it's more of a gender thing. I mean, because you look at stereotype lists for guys, look at it for girls, and they look very similar, where it's like north side this, south side that. But I think every city kind of has that. There's just something about Houston that we kind of own it. And it really kind of helps bring about the culture and the nature of Houston. And I like it. I like it a lot.
Sure.
with all that being said, I think it'd be a good time to plug our sponsors. So,
No doubt.
we grew a lot in the last few years, and we couldn't have grown without our sponsor, Advantual. Advantual Credit Union is a excellent, well-rounded bank in which they have all the services that you could think of, from mortgages, credit cards, savings, with better rates for you. And I am a member of Advantual, so you got to be invited. So you got to go to advantual.com or advantual.org rather, and go to Millennial Community, and so you can sign up with Advantual and get those good discounts and rates. And millennials are cheap, so they got you covered.
Hop on
already.
that.
Yes, yes.
So with all that being said, we wanted to kind of really just take today's show and just talk about all the different generations that we'll basically be talking about in the Knockin' on 30 podcast. We're going to talk about millennials, of course. We're going to
Yep.
talk about baby boomers
yeah.
as they get ready to exit the workplace and all that. No offense. And then we're going to talk about Gen X and Gen Z. So I'll start off by talking about millennials because that's who we are as
Yes.
millennials. And so obviously we are the tech generation. We are the generation that was basically grew up with computers for part of our growing up life.
Right.
Part of our life we were outside in the whole
Yes.
like come inside for the street lights come
Better
on.
be
You know?
in for that street light. Come on.
And then it was that part where you had to unplug the cable just to be able to use the internet.
The
Or
internet.
unplug
Yeah.
the-
Oh my God.
Unplug the
Plugging that-
phone and
that
plug it back
phone
in.
line,
Oh, so
yeah.
nostalgic.
And you
Let's
start
go.
hearing that
Let's
little,
go there.
start hearing that little dial-up noise. Yep.
You like listening, like, nah, that didn't sound like a good connection. I'm
Right.
probably not getting in.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Trying to get in your AOL chat
AOL,
room.
I
I
was
was
just
just
about to
thinking
say
about
that.
that, yeah.
Like, remember the ASL?
ASL,
Like A6
yep,
location?
A6
Yep.
location.
What's your ASL?
Yep,
You know they
yep.
still use that though.
Oh my
Really?
gosh.
How? Just go to Instagram and just look.
I know, but you know the people still be in chat rooms.
Oh,
you
They
chat
still
rooms.
use that. Yeah.
I saw something yesterday said Twitter is just a big old chat room. I thought
I
that
mean,
was hilarious.
That makes
basically it
sense.
is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I ain't asking ASL on Twitter.
Nah.
No,
But
that's too many
because-
witnesses.
Because I'm married. So anyway, she
Definitely
didn't-
no need.
She didn't even hear that.
Nah.
So so millennials, we are also saw something said we are 25 to 30% of the workplace today. So we kind of we taking over DJ Khaled voice there. So
one.
I mean like we basically are just next up, and that's kind of why we wanted to have this Knockin' on 30 podcast, because we all are knocking on 30. I'm knocking the closest,
strong
the
knock.
strongest. Yeah. So
You beating 'em.
I'll be 30 this year, so I won't be
Beating down
knocking
that
anymore.
I'm still knocking. My knocks are getting a lot harder though.
I'm
Oh,
just
yeah.
standing outside.
Yeah. She was like, I don't even know why we calling this Knocking on 30, because I ain't
I
don't
just
apply
got
to me. Like, sure. Anyway, so I mean, like, what does it mean to be a millennial though to y'all? Like, aside from the stats and the data and all that stuff, I mean, like, what does it even mean though?
Man, so for myself, it's definitely a sweet spot, and I say a sweet spot because I mean, just given our age, we're at a point where it's kind of to the point where we're like starting to tip the iceberg in a lot of different areas. So you think about the workplace, think about your life, you think about your family, and you're kind of next up in all those areas. And so when I think about career-wise, a lot of people around this age, you have figured out, or at least are at the cusp of figuring out what it is that you're really going to do when it comes down to your career. For a lot of us that did go to school, you say, well, I want to do something that I went and got my degree in. But statistically proven, we know that there's a lot of us out there that's really not in our major focus, what we got our degree in type careers and jobs. And so to say that we're really at the cusp of that, not only is marriage more of a concern around this age, not only is how do I start my family, but a lot of different things when it comes to finances, like how do I obtain a house? How do I get a new car if I want that? A lot of those things are really starting to come forward for us right now. So I call it a sweet spot because, granted, one, you are still figuring out a lot that's going on, but there's a lot that you also have figured out. And I think we don't really do a good job all the time of taking the credit. We kind of focus a little bit more on what our stereotypes as a generation may be. And that's just from a generational standpoint. But if I got to think personally, we at a sweet spot.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, is that, you said personally, I was going to ask you, is that relative though? To your viewpoint, because
that we have a lot of stereotypes.
No, that you said like the things that matter to us, like the things that are important to us. Is that relevant? Is that relative? Like, is that you in your circle? Do you think about that person that you know, that's a millennial, that's just not taking care of business? Like, is there more of that, or is there more of what you just described?
Yeah,
you
well,
know?
and that's why I had to say that our generation.
You said it what?
It's a healthy balance of both.
It is.
I don't know, because I think that spotlight that we have in those stereotypes, they hold some weight.
They do.
So we can't just say that we're all thinking about buying a house and we're all thinking about a family. There are a lot of us that aren't. There are a lot of people who are questioning, did I even go to school for, like, why did I go to school? Yeah. Much less am I, working in my field of choice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
should I go back to school?
Should I go back to school?
Like, did I waste my time going to school?
Right. I don't think people. I think people are moving more towards entrepreneurship and things like that, or starting like Instagram persona or something like that.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I'll add an interesting fact. So from a think tank that we had last year, we talked about what are you in your career right now? And I think a really great turnout to that event was we had people literally start in their careers, sit down, talk about how do I network in this career. Then we had people change tables if it was of your choice and said, hey, if this isn't the career you want, what is the career that you want? And so now you got a chance to sit down with those of your desired career and say, hey, how do I get started? Where am I at now versus where I should be? So to your point, I do agree that a lot of us have kind of stemmed away from maybe what we even started out doing, whether it was college or not college, just saying, hey, I started in this career, but where am I ultimately going to end up? So I confirm your point.
Yeah. I feel like with millennials too, that the age is such a wide age gap that you got the older millennials who, I ain't gonna call y'all out, but born in like, the early 80s, and they like they disassociate themselves from the millennial generation. They be like, I'm not a millennial. It's like, well,
according to the
statistics,
right? That's what you are.
Yeah. So I just think that's like hilarious. But I can understand why they would say that, because somebody born in like the late 90s compared to the early 80s, that's like two totally different people.
Definitely.
Right? Yeah.
Definitely. And the introduction to what I think we kind of quote unquote label a millennial to be, there's a lot of stereotypes that stand out to match that. And I think to your point, Tony, a lot of the older millennials may not have really had the access to the gadgets and devices and platforms that a kind of like sweet spot type of millennial, had when it came to social media, introduction to technology, etc. So there's definitely a spectrum just even in our generation. So I can imagine how the generations feel, especially those that may be older or even those that may be younger.
Yeah, I was about to say. Yeah. So let's talk about these baby boomers, because you talked about the introduction to technology that we had. They had one too, which shaped their generation as well. And a lot of other things happened in wars and blah, blah, blah. So.
Yeah, very much so post World War II. But they are born between 1944 and 1964. And it's like, that's a long time ago.
Yes.
But it doesn't feel like it was that long ago, does
Definitely.
it? Does
Nah, and I think it's because we were born before the 2000s, right? So it's just more of like that optic. Like when you see it places, it's like,
Dang.
yeah, like I'm a 90s baby. Like
Right.
you kind of be proud of that.
Right. But they are the largest population possibly. So they make up like 26%. Although most of them are about to retire and they're reaching a lot of those sort of milestones, it's like from the research that I did, there's a lot of comparisons between the baby boomers and the millennials as far as our viewpoints on life, because they were coming from, is it transitionalists? The generation before them?
Yeah,
Traditionalists.
yeah.
And so they were a lot more strict. You know, they had a lot more family value. A lot of them are married. Like, I think I saw 65% of baby boomers are married. And I don't know what the statistics are for millennials, but we just pointed out that a lot of us aren't even thinking about it.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to the tagline of boomers also being called traditionalists, we got to give credit where credit's due. And there was a lot of structure that was put in place that I think we're still benefiting from. I know for myself, my parents are definitely in the sweet spot of being boomers. Like, I mean, you look at the numbers, it's like, yep, y'all was born in the 50s. So with that, I mean, y'all know I got an old soul, but definitely was a lot of traditional values instilled in me. And I think some of that we do still benefit as a generation. And there's a lot that we've lost that we probably should pick back up.
So
Yeah.
when you say the boomers, I think about it being post-war, and you say traditional values. I mean, people had no choice, and you talk about marriage. People had no choice but to be married during that time. I mean, you had the woman just entering the workforce and the men out at war. Like, being married was the thing to do. So I don't
Yeah.
think that, I mean, millennials, I mean, women out here working, men out, I mean, it's all about independence.
Mm-hmm.
So
But
that's
I
why
like
think
that there's so many parallels, as in like the activists that you see going on with us versus like someone born in the 40s. They were a part of the
Right.
civil rights movement
Right.
and things of that nature before they kind of turned a little bit more conservative.
Mhm.
But they played a really large role in a lot of the rights that we do have, which is to your point.
Yes.
But a lot of the things that they took advantage of are kind of hurting us now, as far as, you know, Medicare and, you know, Social Security, things of that nature. So,
Yeah, I had heard like I was at a thing and someone was talking. They were saying that every 60 years, history basically repeats itself, and so like we're technically in the 60s right now. You
Right.
see like the Colin
Which makes
Kaepernick stuff. Yeah,
Which makes sense.
it makes
Yeah.
perfect sense.
Yeah.
I wonder if like, you know how baby boomers were getting married, as we said, and all that. But then like now, you know, the last 10 years, I guess, or maybe longer, you heard the statistic about 50% divorce rates, you know? So
Right.
now it's like, well, that's why millennials are like,
Yeah.
Shine away from
they
I
might
don't know.
have wanted to get divorced, but those traditional values kind of
Kinda
kept them from
together.
doing
Right.
that.
Yeah,
Possible.
and so I bring an interesting kind of plot twist to what may be causing a higher spike in divorce now. So think about what was basically in place for boomers when it came to them working. So you were kind of on this track of, I get this job 15, 20 years and you're going to guarantee me a pension. I'm going to have some type of employee retirement plan that like I can live off of the rest of my life. And this is all like pre 401k.
Right.
So, you know, we're talking like, come here, stay here 20 years. This is what you're guaranteed as a package to live off of. And so now when you think about, okay, if I stopped working, and we know that there's 10,000 boomers turning 65 every single day. So if we're now at that mark where, hey, I'm 65, I'm in retirement, I don't have a pension anymore. So now where it was cool that, you know, me and my husband, me and my wife, we living off all this money, is that money still there? And I know I'm not there yet, and Tony probably speaks to this more than me, but finances come up heavy when it comes to marriages. And so you think about the long-term, you know, longevity of a marriage. Is the money there? So if the money ain't there, is a person gonna be there? So that could
Wait,
kind of
wait.
I'm just saying.
I
He
was
said
trying to-
plot
plot
twist.
twist.
I was
I did
trying
say
to
plot
figure out
twist.
where you were
Plot
going with
twist.
this.
I did say plot twist, and sometimes money does make a decision on if somebody gonna stay around. So if I'm 65, 70, and this person
where
I've
you
I
been,
hope that's
going?
not the
hey,
case.
listen,
Where are you going?
listen, I'm just trying to talk.
You going to the retirement bingo to meet somebody? What's
Hey,
going on?
I'm trying to paint this picture that if boomers are all of a sudden having a spike in divorce, hey, money talks. That's all I'll say.
Well,
Okay.
I'll throw another interesting plot twist to that. So I was watching this documentary on Netflix, and then basically it talks about how the rest of the world basically uses like what's it called, arranged marriages.
Right.
So America is really one of the first countries where you get married off of love, and so I think that might be more of a reason. Well, it could be an additional
Could
reason
be.
why people don't
Along
stick
with
around and with money versus just flat out it's the money thing. I think the love wear off and then you be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I
People
go to
don't think
this
about that. They just go
every
through
day.
that. Yeah.
Like, you know, so I don't know. That's an interesting
I don't
point
know
there,
either,
Dennis.
man.
I'm gonna hope that what you're saying has nothing to do.
It could. It
You know,
could
when I
not.
retire, I ain't gonna have that $60,000 I thought I was. So you gotta go. Like, I hope that that's
Hey,
not the case.
That's why, as millennials, we got to put that stuff in place now, to where we make sure not only am I good personally, but my family's also good. That's important.
It is.
Well, I mean, all right, if we go in here though, like, see, for me and being a married millennial, I say that thankfully, like, being my wife, we just about to grind. So, like, you know, when we got married, we were young. We didn't have no money.
Right.
Like, we didn't have. I mean, I had credit. I had established my credit.
There you go.
You know, had a little bit in savings, but we didn't have no money. But so we grinded together. You know, year after year. After year, it's only been 3 years. So three grinds, 3 years. So anyway,
There you
you
go.
know, and so we were building together. So I mean, you know,
Yeah.
it just depends on the person. I
That's
guess.
true.
So,
That is true.
yeah. So about these Generation Xers, Dennis,
Yes.
lead us on here.
So Generation X, you think about, you know, what really made up Generation X. And so they kind of had a nice paradigm when it came to establishing their generation. And so right after boomers, but right before millennials. And so you think about what's really happening in the world during this time, that, like, you know, Gen X is finally starting to come up, and you'll read some articles where they say that this is kind of like the sleeper generation, or I've even seen silent generation, which the silent generation also kind of had a tagline to boomers too. So maybe this kind of epidemic just kind of kept going down to Gen X, but Gen X was really the birth of technology when it came down to what was introduced to their generation. And whether or not they kind of led with it, I think for every generation you have your leaders, you have those that are kind of fall in the middle, and then you have those that's like, nah, y'all still ain't got it, y'all just happen to be this age. And every single generation can say that. Like, you got those that are very mature, you got those that just ain't figured it out. But when it came down to Gen X, two things that really played a heavy role in the development of their generation was cell phones and video games. And you kind of think now there's a lot of video games that are also built for the platform of cell phones now.
Right.
But the introduction to this was the fact that the cell phone was a thing. I know for myself personally, I got a cell phone in the 8th grade, and it was very, like, strict limits on the use of that. Like, you got so many minutes because I ain't playing for this plan. Don't be sending no text messages. Don't be sending no
Right.
picture messages. So was this really a benefit for their generation? And if you're asking me or just anybody out there, I think the answer would be yes, because they were introduced to a new form of communication. And so when you think about that, like, the boomers were surprised when email came about, if we're being honest. They were still faxing things. Email was introduced. And so when you look at X, it's like, oh, I got this cell phone now. Like, I don't have to be at the house and, you know, wait for my mama to get off the phone. Like, I can leave the house. Right. Like, beepers and all of that. Like, I can leave the house and still call somebody if I need to. So definitely was a nice introduction to that generation. But I want to kind of take a little time to spend on video games, because I think as we look at video games through our generations, it definitely has evolved. And so thinking about, you know, Gen X, they had, like, PlayStation was introduced and you had all the new versions of it. I think we may have gotten to, like, PlayStation 3, right, whenever it was like, all right, it's millennials' turn to start taking over video games. But we also had Xbox. So now you start saying, when it comes down to this technology that's being introduced, which way are you going to go? And you almost had to choose. Then you start thinking about development and the evolution of cell phones. You had to choose that too. What carrier am I going to go with? What device am I going to go with? So a lot of those things really start to tailor this generation. And as they were starting to be, introduced to college and like, okay, I'm in college now. Here's more technology that they had at their use. Right. There's a lot of those same values and things that were built in that generation that we as millennials are still benefiting from. But I would just kind of label them as like the intro to technology generation if we really had to put a title on it.
But do we feel like they took advantage of that? Did they take advantage of the technology at that
point? And I think it's because it was so like newly introduced, right? So you think about it, as I gave the example of like email from the boomers. Email was like really starting to become a big thing, where I remember my brother being accepted into college and his acceptance letter was emailed to him. So this was like, well, yeah, you got the physical form too, but everything was now starting to go to like a little bit more of a digital format.
Right,
so I think the only thing that they probably took from it was like email from the boomers, and that was kind of that bridge the gap of transition when it came to generation. But to answer your question, I don't think they took advantage of it though.
Yeah.
You see,
well, I mean, you talked about the cell phone, and I've been sitting here this whole time thinking, like, what was y'all first cell phone? Like, do you remember?
I had a Motorola Razr.
A Razr?
Yes, a
That's
pink
classic.
one, and I was you was dramatic when you ended that
you
call.
like snapped it?
Oh yeah.
Y'all seen that meme with that dude? Like,
Yes.
I mean, it's not a meme, it's a video.
Yeah. That was me. That was me.
I had a Sprint something. I got like the Sprint version of the Razr after the pink one, but it was some like block type silver little Sprint phone, flip phone, of course.
A flip.
I had a flip too.
Yeah, I started out with a flip.
Then I had this red and silver flip, and on the front side, it had this little dial on it where you could, I don't even know what you could do.
Like play music,
you play
right?
Music. You play music
That's
on the
what it
front,
was.
control the
Yeah.
volume.
Yeah.
And then I had a sidekick,
Oh,
the full
Yeah,
text
you was
screen.
real cool.
Hey.
You was real cool with the
Hey,
sidekick.
the sidekick.
I had
it
mine
gets you some
personalized
points.
and everything. Yes.
Ooh.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I
the full
think I
keyboard.
eventually just went and got the BlackBerry.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
I had one of
That was
those.
too businessy for me.
Yeah, when I got the BlackBerry, I was on there.
I liked
Yeah,
it.
I
I
thought
liked that it was
definitely.
businessy, like
Definitely.
the email
You had
and
your
the
BBM.
text, BBM,
Yup.
like the whole keyboard. I really loved it.
Yeah.
I think rappers was talking about BlackBerry too.
They
so
were.
I was
That was the
definitely
thing.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you was like,
it was
yeah.
hard to text on though.
Right.
Yeah.
But then you
Yeah.
eventually get used to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, this is cool. So
Mhm.
I'm gonna just who cares if my thumbs hurt?
Yeah,
Like, it doesn't
and you
matter.
ain't have all the apps, so like your battery lasts
Right.
all day.
You could go like a whole day without charging your phone. Now you
Yep.
gotta bring it with you, and it's just a whole.
I
big
think my
thing.
phone is dead right now. Right.
See, it's funny though. Like all that stuff was probably created by Generation X, and so to say they
Yeah.
didn't take advantage of the technology, I don't know. I
They
guess
kind of did.
Maybe
They
they, was
led
building
it.
it
They
for
led
us.
it.
they led.
Yeah, they let it. They let it
Yeah.
behind the scenes.
Yeah, I guess like maybe technology in the realm that we're talking about, but probably not social media. Because I think that when we think
Right.
of technology, that's kind of where we go with it.
Yeah.
And I feel like, do have a disconnect when it comes to that part.
They use like the way they use social media. You're saying?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think maybe millennials are better users of technology,
right.
And we haven't really been in.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've been in a seat to create the technology yet, because most of us are at the latest like 37. You know, 40s and 50s are still the decision makers at most jobs. So I don't know. I'm just
Well,
playing devil's
maybe, but like
advocate.
us and probably Generation Z are creating a lot of these apps.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
sure.
I don't know what all Silicon Valley is comprised of, but I feel like it's a lot of millennials
Yeah,
out
oh,
there
yeah,
doing
definitely,
some
definitely.
stuff. So
I think we
we're kinda-
spurned off the companies like the Facebooks and the
Right.
Twitters
Yeah.
probably and Instagram and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. I guess the iPhone just monopolized the market so much that
Right.
you
Mhm.
basically have no choice. You know,
Yeah.
we're all iPhone users. Team
Oh,
Blue
that's true.
Text.
We don't answer green text around here.
Discriminating. off the text message is ridiculous.
But no, I agree. I think so. Just to kind of bring Generation X to home, I think they were the introducers to technology and how we can use it. I think a lot of stuff was done behind the scenes that we're now benefiting from. But when you talk about bridging that gap of social media and the introduction of apps and et cetera, that's all millennial to Generation Z. Like, that's where the timeline really changes up. So I appreciate them for what they did, because I sat in classrooms in high school with a laptop, and I don't think that a lot of people from Gen X may have had that opportunity.
No, they definitely didn't.
Yeah, I didn't have that
yeah.
opportunity.
So, I mean, and we kind of, like, we were being funny at the beginning when we talked about, accessing the internet via dial-up. Hey, Wi-Fi was definitely a come up.
Yeah.
A whole come up.
Yeah.
Now kids be mad if they don't have Wi-Fi.
Oh, man, what?
Grandma, I don't have any Wi-Fi.
What's the password?
I'm using all my data.
The little snotty nosed kid. What's your Wi-Fi password?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got games
Come to your
on
house.
phone.
Hello.
phone.
How are you doing? What's your Wi-Fi? No.
So speaking of those people,
Oh, yeah.
Generation
Generation
Z.
Z, very near and dear to my heart. They are the age of 3 to 22, and actually they make up the largest percentage of the population in today's
dang.
society.
Wow.
Over 27%, I believe, of the population, and this is the age where they don't know what it's like to not have a phone, to not have an iPad, not to have any form of technology. When you think about little kids in this age, or even like young kids, they know what everyone had a phone, or they had access to some kind of phone. Even your parents, you turn around 1 second and somebody kid got your phone.
Dang. You just put that in perspective. It made me think of like how my whole life I've always known the sun. So it's like, what if that's how it is for them? Like, the sun is
That's
like
really dramatic.
technology, right?
That's really
They're
dramatic.
born. Think about it,
But
they
they
born with that
really-
light in their face, like they just playing on the like.
But even little
Yeah.
kids these days know how to take
Oh, yeah.
little babies know how to take selfies
Right,
and
that's
be
what I'm
posing and
saying.
stuff for
That's
it like
what I
that.
mean.
That's
Right.
what throws me off, though. I'm never around kids, ever.
Man, so and I'll show y'all like a real quick example to talk about like the differences, right? So I'm in Chili's the other night, and y'all know like Chili's has like the little like table display things.
With
Right.
games.
With
and
the
you can
games,
So
pay
the
it's
whole
with games
console.
now. It's with games. And so I just kind of like took a second to kind of just gaze around the restaurant, and I did not see any child, like when I say child, like you look at them and know they're a kid. Like I didn't see any child literally sitting there coloring. Like I looked forward that when I went out to eat with my
You know, you
parents,
had
I was going to get
setup
that
with the
coloring
three
page
colors,
with the
three
three colors.
red,
Yes.
yellow, and blue. That's
No,
it. That's all
but
you
they-
had.
But they're
Maybe
literally
green.
Maybe
like,
green.
yeah. But no, now it's a device right here in front of me, and I'm playing these games, whether it's the one at Chili's or the iPad that I brought in. So,
Man, me and Crystal, my wife, we went to Dave and Buster's the other day just to literally grab lunch. Like we just like she wanted this
Their
burger.
happy hour is pretty good.
So we went there real quick, and then she said the funniest thing, like it's on a Saturday too, so you got all these, it's a daytime, all these kids running around, and she was like, "This is like the baby Las Vegas." Like, it
No
really
lie.
is,
Now that
though.
you said that, yes.
yeah. But I definitely think that they have something that they can bring to the table.
Right, and I feel like their generation is basically driven off of social media personas. You see a lot of kids, or even just media personas. We have YouTube like skyrocketing off of young kids making videos. I mean, they're really creative in the way they want to monopolize on their time and energy.
Yeah.
Facts.
And I will add to that, there's an advantage there, right? So you think about what social media was able to do for all generations. Like my mom, cracks jokes about, oh, I can't do this and that on my Facebook, and that's kind of where like the road stops for her. But back to Gen Z, they have a plethora of apps, social media platforms, etc. And there's a benefit there, because when we think about starting this organization, it's like social media was a great benefit,
Right.
For us to kind of get our message
sure.
out there, our image out there, etc. So I think when it comes to that particular generation, so long as they use it in beneficial ways, which you're in school, so when they don't,
Right.
and I've been there too. So there's definitely a benefit to it, but I just hope that for the long term, this generation almost shows us and kind of sets the standard of etiquette when it comes down to it. And I don't really know that that's happening.
For everything you gain, you lose something. So they
True.
losing social skills off top,
Yeah.
They're-
and then the ability to use their hands.
And
is
I feel
gone.
like they definitely have lowered on the worth ethic side, because in the classroom, kids, you expect them to like take notes just like back in the day. Oh, they don't even want to do. I'll take a picture with my phone and then I'll go back to talking. Like, pause. You still need to do something in the classroom.
Yes.
I
So I
can only
don't
imagine.
Yeah, And it's
Yeah.
just
It's something about learning though, where you actually use your hands, or your
Hands.
eyes.
You have
when
to make that
actually
connection.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like you can't just take a picture of it and then
just go on about your day because they're not reading it.
But it's ridiculous though. Like, man, like I was with some friends the other night and it was like 11 o'clock at night and I was like, I'm hungry. And we just called DoorDash and then the guy just knocked on the door and just delivered my food. I was like, this is how it feels to be Gen Z.
Right,
Like,
instant gratification
I
right
can't
there.
even be mad.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I
That's
didn't
all
have
they
to
know.
leave.
Yeah.
That's all they know.
Man, and so it's funny you bring that up. I think about Astroworld when Astroworld was still out here in Houston, and
it
Ooh,
was
good
still out here.
times.
yeah, when it was still out here, we're not gonna go there, Delenn. Okay, we're not doing the Houston
Did you even
Dallas
get to
thing.
experience Astroworld?
I didn't need to. We had Six Flags.
And they still have it.
Right.
We still
All right.
in Hurricane Harbor.
Okay.
They got wet and wild.
But no, so to kind of bring home my point, I'm sitting like I remember me and my boys like scrapping up change. We were gonna pay a $42 cab that was gonna take us one way from the east side of Houston to Astroworld, and we had season passes. We didn't have to worry about getting in, etc. But you think about now, and I have kids like we used to walk in my classroom when I was a teacher. That's like, oh girl, you want to do this and this after school? I just get an Uber and we'll just. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
man, I wish I could just go to
Yo.
my phone and just order a ride and they pull up outside.
I mean,
like,
you have
man.
the kids don't even pack lunches anymore. They have stuff delivered like
To
during
school?
lunch to
Yes,
school.
to
Like
school.
there no parents dropping off lunch. You know, like when you used to take a test, like my mom used to pack me Subway. We go the night before. I got a
Right,
soggy little
right.
sandwich. No, they have Chick-fil-A delivered.
Yes.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I was about to say.
That's cool.
I was
kinda
sick.
dope.
It's cool if your school allow it,
Yeah.
but
Oh, our school
I
definitely,
know
yeah.
for a fact
Yeah.
on test days it was an announcement.
Man.
Listen, ain't no DoorDash showing up here, ain't no favor. We not signing off on this. Tell your parents do not order from these particular platforms.
Wow.
So the
So
fact that you have to include
You
that
just
now,
said the key word though, parents. Like the
Yeah.
parents are the ones that
That
Yeah.
allow the gatekeepers. They
Yeah.
allow it to happen. They're like,
Right.
you know
Well,
what?
Yeah.
they see it as a
Just fine.
convenience.
Just they're probably losing. Like you probably can't win.
Right.
No.
You know.
No,
And-
how can you control it at this point? When you
Right.
can do it all from your phone or
Yeah.
from the computer. Like
Yeah.
have your friend do it. There's so many avenues.
So what's next for them though? I wonder. Like where will they end up? Like when they're knocking on 30. Like
The world will be completely different.
Yeah.
right, and I'll be knocking on. Never mind.
ooh,
Well, and it's funny because like when we were probably the same age as Gen Z, we were told that cars are gonna be flying,
Right.
and, like all this kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see like what the
Yeah,
actual.
because we're that much closer to the self-driving car.
yeah, we are.
This is
So,
true.
But not
I'm
flying.
ready for that.
I ain't flying in nobody car.
Nah, I ain't flying. either.
Everything about to go electric though.
That's true.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get
Now.
a Tesla.
Hey, you might can get anything electric. Son.
Yeah, straight
Yeah.
up.
Like
I
for
mean,
real.
well, hybrid was already that
That-
first kind of step,
Right.
and then Tesla just kind of took off with it. So
Well, GM and Jaguar, a lot of companies they going
Oh, yeah.
all
Electric,
electric.
yeah.
So, well, the reason why we wanted to kind of lay the foundation on this generation topic is because we're gonna be talking about these generations throughout the podcast. It's not just about millennials the whole time, and so when we talk about Generation Z, Generation X, baby boomers, we want to make sure that you know who they are and kind of like how we look at them anyway. This is our definitions backed with some statistics and data. So that's why we kind of dived into all that information about generation this, that, and the other. But we also want to make sure that we include a very special point in the show.
Right.
We want to
Yes.
introduce the word of the week. This word of the week is brought to you by Miss Hunter.
Yes. All right. So, for those who don't know, I am in education and I, work around middle school children. So I try to, I'm a little stylish. I wear like tennis shoes and stuff like that. So one day I decide, today I'm going to stun on them. I'm going to wear my Air Max 97s and I'm going to be a little fly today. And so I walk in and the kid's like, oh, Miss Hunter, you look fly or whatever. And then there's just this one little boy, oh, that's cringy.
Cringy.
What? Yes, cringy. This is the new word for lame, not appealing.
Oh wow.
So cringy.
But I like it.
You like it?
I like it.
It
You
makes
like
me
it?
cringe.
Yeah, it does, and I just can't like. imagine looking at something, not liking it, and saying that's
cringy.
cringy.
Like there's so many other words that I'm not saying cringy.
That word remind me of the Ashleys on Recess when they used to say, "Ooh, skin."
Yes,
It's cringy.
yes, and that's how they said it too.
Oh,
That's exactly how they
I
said it.
nailed
It's
it.
Catchy. Let them have it. Let them.
Hey,
but
do
we
their
don't need
thing.
to say it. We don't need let them have it.
I
You're
will
right.
let them have it.
Yes.
It might pop up every now and again.
Oh,
but
Lord.
I'll let them.
Definitely
have
gonna put that on a shirt. Well, with all that being said, we're gonna end the podcast. This was Knocking on 30. We are the Millennial Community. Thank you for tuning in, and just keep on listening to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and anywhere where you can catch podcasts, as well as YouTube, because we are video friendly also. We'll see you every week. This is the Millennial Community signing out.